Okay, so let me welcome everyone who's here and everyone who's online and say on behalf of our colleagues, it's just a very proud moment to be here on behalf of Columbia. I think, hopefully our students agree, we teach well, we build networks, we build communities, we're a caring community, we're happy when our students and alumni are happy and they grow. We're happy, oh, hi Svetlana. We're happy to represent Columbia. It's a global school. We have resources around the country, and particularly, we're proud also that we're able to offer events like this on campus and online. And sometimes they're separate and sometimes they're hybrid. So they're going to be hybrid today. We have people who are online. We have people here in New York. And we're going to execute a process. Oh God, that sounds like an academic, doesn't it? We're going to do stuff that helps people interact with each other, whether we're here physically or online. So thank you. I'm here representing the School of Professional Studies, where what we bring to life is the marriage really of theory and practice. So we'll teach the theory of our 18 master's programs, but it's really how does this play, Jill, you might appreciate this, how does this play in Peoria? How does it really work? And we hope to help our students understand that, talk about what's going on for them at their jobs and in their careers. And I'm from the Human Capital Management Program. Beth Fisher-Yoshida's on virtual and is going to be we call her our super facilitator. Beth in many ways is a superwoman. She's a program director of the Negotiation and Conflict Resolution Program. And we have Christoph Marankin who will be joining us for the Information and Knowledge Strategies. And our three programs it's a very collaborative environment in SPS, and our three programs tend to do things together. I want to thank our admin teams, our colleagues who have helped us put together, from our administration to events to technology, video, audio, and of course food and beverage. I'll introduce our panelists in a moment. You see them here, and they're worthy guests, as you all are. But I thought I'd like to show you how the process will work, and then the panelist introductions will be a part of that. So I gaze towards the screen, and I'm told there's a little bit of a lag, so I don't want to go too fast. Maybe someone can help me out and just advance the slide, please. Okay, so I could call them pillars, they're actually boxes, but we're going to share with you expertise and perspective. And our panelists represent that, and as you'll hear from the introductions, they have great backgrounds, and I think you'll hear them having great things to say. However, we've intentionally set up the process both in the room and on Zoom so that the energy of the event happens at the tables. So oftentimes we go and we hear from panelists, and it's wonderful. We hear from panelists, we learn something, there's some Q&A, there's a little bit of talking. But what we'd like from the panelists, and what we've asked them to do, is kind of to prime the pump. So they'll be answering some questions, we'll have a little bit of crosstalk, and then we're going to turn it over to you. We'll talk about how that works in a second. And our objectives here are to synthesize thoughts across various disciplines, various backgrounds, to talk about leadership in a turbulent world, because as you've probably noticed, it's kind of turbulent out there. And our principle, and I like to say this is both a way to live and also is kind of a nice comfort, is we're going to focus on agility. So if we can't hear people on the screen or they can't hear us, we'll work it. We'll want you to be able to talk to the people at your table and just kind of flex a little bit and have some fun at the event as well. Okay, so how does it work? Let's go through the process. So we're going to spend about 25 minutes or a half hour in what I call affectionately panel time. And then you're going to hear from the panelists. We'll show you what you're going to hear. We'll encourage you to not only listen to the panelists, but you have books in front of you, take notes. Because what you hear from the panelists could very well spur conversations among the tables. So try to hunker down and say, oh, okay, that's an interesting point. I'd like to pursue that later. Okay, so we'll go to the table in breakout time. That'll also be about 30 to 45 minutes. Talk about how that works too. After that time, so remember, stage one, panelists, stage two, breakouts. Then we're going to ask each of the tables to do a readout. And the readout will be from us in the room and also from people in the Zoom room. So we're going to be able to hear from each other. And then, unfortunately, we can't offer this as fulsomely for the people in Zoom, but they'll be eating and drinking and networking, and we can put on some music. Those of you who want to dance, go, feel free. Okay. But we're setting aside time. Hopefully you've seen there's food as you came in because it is dinner hour. We thought you'd be hungry, so the teams worked hard to get food together, there'll be more food later, and there's drink, and usually the drink leads to the dancing, and on we go. Okay. Next slide, please. Great. So, you've already done this, thank you. Sit at any table you like. There's an assigned facilitator for each table and also each breakout room online. We're going to be discussing 3 topics. We're going to be discussing what's changed about employee expectations and employer expectations in this turbulent world. We're going to be talking about what's it like to have difficult conversations that are likely becoming more difficult in the workplace. And we're going to talk about, as the world is changing and being able to embrace and try to leverage data and algorithms, what does that mean for leadership? What does it mean when more data is available? And we'll hear from Tamika a little bit about that to prime the pump. But if you think, I'll just kind of foreshadow, I think, anyway. So Tamika, hopefully I get this right. But from my perspective, if you look over the years, organizations have always been organized hierarchically. And the people at the top have the most access to information. Not so true anymore. What does all that mean? But Tamika's going to be able to represent or say that I was wrong much more fulsomely than I. Okay. So at your tables, your facilitators know that you have a set of you have 3 sets of 2 pages. Each set of papers aligns to one of the topics. It's up to you at the table to decide which of these topics you'd like to discuss, or perhaps you'd like to discuss 2 or 3. And you'll see in a moment the questions that we're going to ask you to address. I will remind you and urge you a few things. First of all, because timing is tight, try to save the deeper introductions for those of you around the table for the networking. So try to get right into the work if you can. And try to keep things crisp because there's a lot to cover. We'll see how much we can cover. But what we're going to ask you is to describe in your words some of the challenges that you'll hear from the panelists. Give examples from your workplace. So if you've had examples, for example, of a difficult conversation or a new use of data or changes in employee and employer expectations, we'd love to hear about it. We always tell our students we'd like to hear about how this is showing up at work so that they can help you assimilate it. And then the third, very importantly, and we're probably not going to be able to solve all the challenges that we have out there today, but if you can get to some solutions, okay, what would you do about it? That would be interesting to hear. So at the tables, we're going to ask you to cover 1 or all 3 of the challenges with examples and solutions. The facilitators will reinforce that and help you through that. Okay? Great. And just a sound check, we're okay in the Zoom meeting, Lisa? Everyone can hear us? Great. Thank you. Terrific. Okay. Do I have another slide? I frankly don't remember. This feels like class. Ah, there's it is. Okay, so that allows me to turn it over to the panel. All right, panelists, welcome. Thank you very much. And remember the clock? Hello. We've met before. Thanks for joining us. So I'd like to ask each of you first to introduce yourself and a little bit of your background, and then I'll ask you some questions.
Well, first, I just want to call out that I'm a little bit upset you didn't say that there was dancing. I would have brought my flats, so yeah.
Agility.
Agility. Hi, everyone. I'm Kim Tran, and I serve as Senior Vice President for Client Success and Learning for Anywhere Real Estate. It's a parent company that is home to a lot of major companies that you probably know, like Century 21, Corcoran, Sotheby's International, Coldwell Banker. So we're the parent company, and my job is really to provide training and upskilling and coaching and networking and mentorships for about a little over 311,000 of our agents and brokerages worldwide. And a little bit about my background, I am so passionate about learning and leadership and technology and innovation. So I get to combine all of those things in my roles. I've been in a number of industries and then within the consulting space. And I'm really excited to be here with you all to help facilitate this amazing brain trust that we're gonna have tonight.
Great, thank you. Welcome.
Hi, everyone. My name's Susan Levin, and I am a lecturer in the Negotiation and Conflict Resolution program at SPS in Columbia. Really delighted to be here, and I know I'm going to learn from the conversations tonight. I teach on the complexity of conflict and change management, and I include the study of neuroscience in my course. I'm also a global consultant, and I'm a certified coach, a certified mediator. I also am a trainer and an organization development practitioner. And I consult with organizations to provide strategic planning, leadership development, building teamwork in the US, and I've worked in more than 40 countries around the world. And I know that in every system there are things that are working. And so I really like to come in and ask that question in organizations to help them build on that foundation so that they can tackle their challenges. And I also teach conducting difficult conversations at the World Bank, National Institutes of Health, for women in aerospace, and other organizations. And I am just really delighted to be here and talk about these important topics that we're going to be discussing.
Great, thank you and welcome. Tamika.
Hey everybody, it's so great to see so many people out in the rain, so thank you for making the time for this conversation. My name is Tamika Vasquez. I'm a founder and partner at an advisory group called The Future Quo. I started this practice 3 years ago mainly because I wanted to be able to have conversations about the future and where we're all going. And I wanted to be able to have those conversations across different industries and with people from different backgrounds and just democratize this practice of thinking about the future. Before that, I spent about 13 years in the tech industry, and so I do come from that background for the most part. I did marketing strategy and business development strategy work, so I was usually helping a tech company sell a product. That's basically what it came down to. IKNS grad, so my master's thesis focused on the impacts and the opportunities for what we're now talking about 10 years later, which is AI. And so just have a lot of different perspectives about topics like that, but the conversation about the future is much bigger than just technology. So excited to get in today's conversation, and hopefully we'll learn a lot from each other.
Great, thank you. So as you notice, we could have stayed with the panelists and talked all night, but we want to give you an opportunity also to share your perspectives, and the panelists will be roaming the tables as well, so we can all learn from each other, which is really the principle of the night. So thanks for coming, and that's all. No, let's get into it. All right. Kim, hi.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good to see you. So here's my question. Make believe I'm not reading it. Now, how would you describe, and what are 1 to 2 challenges about differing employee expectations and relationships between employees and employers? How are things changing in the workplace from your perspective, given this new world?
Thank you. I did my homework on this one because I have my perspective. I have my perspective. I actually called a lot of phono friends that are across industries just to kind of gut check what I was seeing. And I would say there are 2 pretty dominant themes that I'm seeing that's really changing, like the employer-employee contract, the social contract, I'll call it. One is redefining the employee value proposition. And what I mean by that is today, employees want way more than just pay and perks to stay, okay? They really are looking for purpose. They're looking for continuous growth in the company. They're looking for flexibility, not only flexibility in how they work, but flexibility in where they work. I think COVID really disrupted that for us. And they're also looking for a sense of belonging and well-being services. That is a lot of demands. And I think to be really competitive, employers really have to figure out how do we actually expand and really reimagine the value that we can give to employees, because they'll just leave. I mean, that you see that a lot. We don't have that loyalty to company, loyalty to brand, not even loyalty to bosses sometimes. And they're really trying to think about what is in my best interest for myself, for my family, for my health, for my financial well-being. And so we're seeing that shift. And I think the companies that are getting it right are really now trying to very much personalize and give more of a holistic employee experience in that way. So I'll say that's the first one. And then the second one is really around reskilling the workforce. Raise your hand if you're ever hired somebody. Okay, so just about everybody, and virtual hand raises, I'm sure. Right now what we're seeing is a tight labor market, so hiring is taking longer. The candidate pool is a lot wider, but finding that right candidate is taking a lot longer. We're also seeing that there are some significant talent shortages. So the skills that I need, a lot of them aren't even developed yet. You mentioned AI. You had the amazing foresight of that 10 years ago. We're all trying to play catch up. And so you have this problem where companies are really trying to hire for different skills. Some of them don't really know what those skills are. They just know that they need something different. And then you have compounded on that advances in technology, predominantly with AI. And then you have business models and strategies constantly changing. Those are not like 5-year plans anymore, but it's like year by year by year now. Like, how are we really thinking about business? How is the macro conditions changing? And then we have to pivot. And then how does that influence or impact our workforce planning? And so I wanted to highlight, I jotted this down, and I think this will be really helpful as you're thinking about this question in your small groups, just to have some data points for you to have top of mind for you. The 2025 World Economic Forum for Future of Jobs report, I look at this report every single year when it comes out. It is an amazing resource, so I highly encourage you to dip into it if you haven't. But I'm gonna just throw out some statistics just to help you think through how is this impacting your own spaces and your teams. We have 85% of employers plan to prioritize upskilling for their workforce. 70% expect to hire staff with new skills. 40% plan to reduce staff as their skills become less relevant. And 50% plan to transition staff from declining to growing roles. So now you might be asking, well, what are those, fastest growing skills and declining skills? I did the homework for you. So the fastest growing skills right now across the markets are AI, digital literacy, big data, and cybersecurity. Relevant core skills, these are things that while machines and large language models and AI are getting better at, humans are still in the lead here. And this is analytical thinking, learning agility, resilience, critical thinking, decision making. And then the skills that we're seeing declining in the market pretty significantly is operational, manual, repetitive tasks, rote memorization. So just think of those areas as you're talking amongst yourselves to see how is this impacting even how you're upskilling yourself, but as you're thinking broadly to your teams and organizations.
Kim, thank you. And just in case people missed it, what was the source of that too?
The source is the 2025 World Economic Forum Future of Jobs report.
Great. And those of you HCM students who are here, there will be a quiz.
It's only 100 pages, so it's great for late night reading.
Great. Okay, Susan, back to my cheat sheet.
Thank you. You could probably just take that report and run it through ChatGPT and probably get the key themes on that.
How did you know that? That's exactly what I did.
Is that exactly what you did? Excellent.
I thought Kim was on her phone checking if the kids were okay at home. So Susan, how would you describe, and what are 1 or 2 challenges, that result from increasing complexity in addressing difficult conversations?
Thank you very much. So we currently live, don't we, in a VUCA world, right? A world that is, volatile.
Unpredictable? Things fall out of nowhere?
Things fall, you got to be flexible. Right, it's volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And what neuroscience will tell us is that humans are hardwired to resist change. We don't like it, generally speaking. I mean, it can often depend on, what the change is. If it's something that you are welcoming and wanting, it can be different. But the initial reaction, the lizard brain of the human, is to resist. And so what we actually prefer is the status quo, what's called neural stability, versus neuroplasticity, which is things that change and new experiences. So it's really hard to break out of those patterns of behavior and ingrained beliefs, right? The good news is, of course, that we can change, and we do change all the time. And so for leaders, thinking about how to adapt to those initial instinctual responses that all humans have, which is a great leveler for humanity, actually, to think that no matter your background, your brain works very similarly to everybody else on the planet, which is pretty amazing. So understanding the impact of neuroscience is a great starting point. So self-awareness of that, and for leaders to understand and recognize how they interact with their staff, with those who, their colleagues, is really important so that they can reflect and make adjustments as they move forward and are able to strive for really effective, authentic leadership. And I would like to say that it's important to have compassionate leadership. And so the challenge is how to get there. And so in the swirl and turbulence that's really all around us, it's always been that way. It just seems like it's accelerating, doesn't it? How do you ground yourself? How do you find sort of inner calm so that you can be a really useful model to everybody else around you? Because if you're able to do that, then you can also make better decisions and also have that contagious effect on all of those around you, because as Carl Jung said, emotions are contagious. So it's really interesting, if you want to understand an organization, listen to the conversations. Listen to what's going on in the hallway, the break rooms, the virtual meetings, and you will definitely get a flavor of what's happening in that particular organization. And so they also, organizations, right? We know companies, you think about where you work or where you have worked, or community organizations you belong to, and they mirror societal dynamics. So bringing conversations on topics like politics, race, religion into the workspace is very difficult, and it's difficult to address those. So we have more and more issues of diverse perspectives, power dynamics, lots and lots of organizational transition out there. And so most employees and leaders are often unprepared for those conversations. They'd rather avoid them, and what happens is you don't get to the heart of the issue. So you're really not bringing up what's so important to discuss, because it's also difficult to know how to do that in the best way possible. So I'm looking forward to your solutions out there on how to have those difficult conversations. So sometimes too, leaders need to navigate that fine line between legal issues, strategy, competitive information, and being as transparent as possible. So it really can be a delicate balance there. So leaders do play that pivotal role, for sure. And they set the tone and they model the way. So everybody's looking at the boss, the leader of the organization. What are they doing? How are they interacting? What are their values? What are the principles that they're demonstrating? And that really creates the opportunity for an environment where people can raise these issues. So a couple of challenges that I thought were important for us to talk about. One is, how can that leader stay grounded and calm amidst all the turmoil that's out there in order to model the best way forward? And then how can a leader create an environment of psychological safety, right? How can we feel free to bring these issues up and to be able to talk about the very things that don't get spoken about? So how can you have a process to disagree without being disagreeable? And that, I think, is really important. I'd like to hear what you have to say about that. And then what can a leader do when emotions get high, tensions escalate, and people start feeling uncomfortable? How can that be managed in the best way possible to be productive? And if I may, I'd like to just leave you with a quote from a book called The Pivot Year by Brianne Wiest. And she says, Do not allow your hope to be extinguished with time. No matter what the world might take from you, do not let your faith that another experience is possible. Another chapter will begin one day. A new life will be formed from the ruins. If there is one thing that you must hold on to, it is only this, that change is not possible, it's inevitable. So it can be different and better than it ever was before. So I want to leave you with a silver lining on the possibilities of change and what can result.
Very good, thank you. There's also a shorter quote by David Bowie who said, changes.
I think Steve is ready for the dancing.
Nah. All right, thank you. So Tamika, to wrap up as our third panelist, and I notice people are taking notes, and I'm hoping that's true in Zoom land as well, because that will help facilitate some good conversations among yourselves. So Tamika, how would you describe, and what are one or two challenges that result from a shift from positional authority to the reign of data and algorithms?
Is anybody the firstborn child in their family? Yeah, same. Okay, so this is gonna be fun, because I think that is a perfect example of positional authority by default of you being born first. It's expected that you probably set the examples for your younger siblings. It's expected that you would be a self-starter, etc. So sometimes there's positional authority that assumes a certain degree of innate ability to lead. And I think I always kind of default to that, because I think about the ways that so much of the workforce and how we qualify leadership in the workforce is largely through the lens of management. And I want to start there as far as what I think is one of the biggest shifts that we are seeing in this world that is more dominated by data, by information, by analytics, by algorithms, and all of these things. We have largely promoted people into leadership who were just there first, right? They were just born first. They did something well in their last role, that moves them into their next role. So from a management perspective, there are lots of folks out there that are running teams, running departments, running companies that are really good at being self-starters, that are really good at solving problems, that know how to operate, right? But what we're seeing now, I think this conversation is largely about leadership on purpose. It's not about management per se, because management may just very well rely on what you've done before, historical information. What can you rely on as far as your own intuition in knowing how to solve a problem? But we are in a space where leadership is the thing that we need to bring to the table. And leadership is not really about operations as much as it is about people. So I think from, one of the biggest things I want for you all to think about at the tables and in general is, what are those unique attributes that distinguish a person who is a manager from a person who's a leader? And I think particularly when it comes to a lot of what, like Susan was talking about, for example, thinking about the pace of change in our world, thinking about what feels like volatility, what feels like constant fluctuation. Leadership in this time is about your ability to bring calm to the situation. I really appreciate that you said that. And leadership really is about your ability to help people understand not just what's happening, but why is it happening? What does it mean for us? What does it mean in terms of our path forward? And there may be instances where that's not super clear, and I think that's where the conversation around data really starts. With the proliferation, I would say, of more data, I think it allows us, a little bit more of an understanding of the stuff. But then you as a leader have to take the data that's provided to you and contextualize that. Apply it to the environment that you're in that is unique in its own ways. The folks that are under your care are dealing with circumstances that maybe on paper look exactly the same as every other company, but the nuances of what might make it particularly difficult for your team or your department requires that you get people at tables like this. Get them around talking about, why is this challenging for us? The data may say something, but until we apply it to our environment, it may not actually have any meaning. So that's kind of one thing I wanted to point out for you guys to think about. I think our job as leaders in this time is collaboration more than anything else, not just the business as usual. We're not on assembly lines anymore. We are in a space that requires deep collaboration. The second thing I wanted to point out for you all is really thinking about this shift away from certainty into a shift towards what I would classify as fluidity and flexibility. And I'll break that down a little bit just so you all kind of understand my thought process, but I'd be very curious about how this sits with you. When it comes to the fact that we just have access to so much more information, so much more knowledge, so much more data at our fingertips, we think that that is going to create a sense of certainty, right? I type in a question, I get an answer. There's something about that transaction that I think is tricking us into believing in this concept of certainty. There is no such thing as certainty in the human experience. Fundamentally, the human experience is uncertain, right? We have no idea what's going to happen to us at any time. It's part of what makes us uniquely human because we rely on each other, we rely on our senses, our intuition, we rely on our lived experiences to help us navigate the world. That's always been true, right? But because we have so much data, I think we're romanticizing this idea that we're gonna get the answer right. And that's not at all what's happening. The human experience is fundamentally uncertain. So anytime anyone is talking about certainty, hold their hand, hold them close, and just remind them there is no such thing. So with more data and with more information at our disposal, what I'm hopeful for is that we can start to embrace complexity, right? The fact that we know more makes the world feel a little bit more complex, but through that complexity, I think we have an opportunity to deepen our understanding of what makes us uniquely human and the things that we're able to create, the products, the services, the ways we organize, the ways we can, sell ideas, bring each other into different ways of working, different ways of being, different ways of living. That complexity is an opportunity in and of itself, but that requires us not solving for the certainty or the predictability, but more so being open to the what if. So now that we know this, what can we do? What is possible? And I think it's interesting because the concept of VUCA that Susan brought up, that concept is more of a mindset than anything else because that was a concept that was developed during wartime. So we are operating as though we are at war. And I want you guys to think about that because so much of how we think about business and organizations, it's still very much rooted in this mindset of wartime reality where you have to anticipate a threat. You have to be able to predict what is likely to happen next. And those skills may feel comforting, but those are not actually the skills that create leadership in this time. What's going to create leadership in this time is your ability to be open-minded, your ability to be constantly curious, have a sense of wonder, have a sense of commitment to a vision that's beyond today, right? Thinking about the future more holistically and the possibilities that are available to us. And it's something I want you all to think about because, again, algorithms and the ways that they're designed are responding to immediate things. So the very last thing you did determines the very next thing that the algorithm thinks that you're going to do. And that's cool when it comes to helping you decide on a restaurant. It's not cool when it comes to helping you choose a life partner. I think we've probably all seen that. It's not very cool when it comes to helping to design teams and finding ways for people to work together. So this algorithmic way of being is not going to get us into a place of certainty. It's not going to get us into a place of accuracy. It's just going to make us feel comforted that there is a likely behavior to follow the last one. But how do we get to that place of just clarity is through these conversations around what are we solving for, why, what's the kind of future we want to design, and all of those things. So I just want you guys to think about that. One of the examples I want to leave you with is this statistic from PwC that it's similar to Kim. It's a report that I'm always looking at, and it's talking about the future of leadership and all this other stuff. And this statistic keeps going up every year because I'm pretty sure when I looked at it in 2024, it was around 40% of CEOs of companies that believe that their company would not be viable in 10 years if they don't learn how to make shifts, if they don't learn how to be more agile. That percentage is now up to 45 this year. And so I'm just curious about why that's on the uptick. And I think in large part it's because we have so much access. Ironically, that amount of access, I think, is creating a sense of anticipation, constant anticipation. It's creating a sense of fear, uncertainty, you know, this kind of like constant anxiety-inducing way of being in these organizations, and it's not healthy for us. So I want us to think about, you know, how do we enable decision-making at different levels so that it's not just all on the person that's perched at the top, the firstborn kid, right? It's not just all on them, but there is an opportunity for folks at different levels of the organization to think about, well, what data do I have access to, and how might that enable me to think differently, and then be able to pass that on to other people that are depending on you, you know, to make the right decision in your day-to-day kind of work. So those are just things that I think, very broadly speaking, we want to be in a place of being logical and calculated and all of that, but ultimately we're human beings, and the thing that we must rely upon is more so our humanness, right? The emotional intelligence that comes from being in community and being in spaces and learning constantly, similar to what Kim was saying. Those are the things that are really going to get us where we want to be.
Great. Tamika, thank you. Thank you very much, panelists. Tamika, Susan, Kim. So time for the mixing it up. Let me remind you
The fun part.
what the expectation is.
So this is the fun part.
Yeah, for the dancing. So here's this, and people in the Zoom room, please, as well. On your tables or in your breakout rooms, you'll have papers that respond or align with each of these questions. One around employer-employee expectations, one around difficult conversations, one around positional authority versus data and algorithms. Again, we encourage you to pick any or all of those questions that you'd like to talk about. It's also, at least for the time being, a free country. You can mix up the questions if you like. Oh, why did I say that? You can mix up the questions if you like. Just get into some fulsome conversations. Again, this is a little bit of an aside, but students, if you can sit with people whom you don't know, that's another advantage of being here. So try to mix it up with people that might bring different perspectives than the ones that you spend time in class and outside of class with. But let's spend 30 to 45 minutes tackling these questions. And again, we'd like you to try to drive to solutions. What are some ways of dealing with these issues? And we'd also encourage you, again, and this sounds antisocial, spend less time introducing yourselves around the table, because that will eat up time. Save that later for the plenary networking. Although in the virtual rooms, please handle it any way you're comfortable. Great, so 30 to 45 minutes, have at it. Facilitators, please take notes. All right, everyone. Sounded like good conversations. Didn't see any fights. That's always a good thing in a turbulent world. So, excuse me. You can see our online participants. Everyone wave to them, please. Wish them a happy Thursday. Good. All right, so we're all in one big room. So here's the deal. I'd like to ask a question, ask a facilitator to volunteer an answer, and then we'll go to another table. And what I'd like to ask, and this is usually tough, when we go to the second table and the third table, and we'll probably start with 2 or 3 tables here, and then go to Beth representing the virtual meeting. But as you contribute, try to build on the answer before, and try to the extent possible, if you're going to reflect or repeat, just briefly, but see what we can do in terms of an additive conversation. And then as we start getting a little bit going, we might jump from question to question to question and table to table to table. But let's see how the momentum starts. So again, let's try to keep the readouts crisp and to the extent that we can, additive. If not, Brad has a horn he will blow and we'll start all over again. Okay. So let's start with the employee-employer relationships and expectations question. What table dealt with that question and what facilitator can volunteer? All right, we have a table. We're going to get a microphone to you. There'll be microphones running around. Thank you, with people attached to them.
Hi, everyone. My name is Keisha. This is table 6. So we focused on that question for our whole breakout session. Some of the challenges we spoke about were the 5-generation workforce, employers having different considerations now, equity and compensation is different. social contract, like grazing or putting down roots. Employers are losing on the turnover rates, losing that psychological safety when it feels like we're moving forward, but then there's no trust, and then trusting your leader more than the organization is another challenge.
Great,
And-
I'm gonna thank you. Just
Yeah.
trying to stop you there. We'll go to another table. We can always come back, but.
Okay.
Great. Any other table that dealt with that question that has a description or challenges to add? Cover the waterfront? Solange, you always have something else to say. Oh, okay, good, good. Anyone else covering that question? Oh, please.
We went in different directions.
That's what we want to hear. Let's hear what your table has to say. Great.
Yeah, what we discussed is mostly the hybrid and, remote hybrid in-person model. And I think the consensus was that everyone likes hybrid. But, we're thinking like, okay, it's more productive when you're in person, but for some jobs it's better when you're remote. So there's a little bit of discussion there. That was not our main topic though. So we focused more on the other topic, but
And probably for some people, it's better when it's remote, but for a few.
yeah, but the consensus is like fully remote doesn't work. Like unless you're, unless you get together with people.
Are you done?
Yeah.
Oh, I wasn't sure if you actually finished your point. No, because I was sitting over there. I really loved the discussion that table was having. It wasn't, to your point, it wasn't directly about this topic, but it was very connected to the topic in the ways that because of these flexibilities, how might that shift the ways that people expect their employers to show up in their lives? Because if you're spending lots of time at work, that's compartmentalized, right? Like it's in person, you know the purpose of being there, you can leave and kind of block it out. But if you're at work and, shifting to being at home or you're fully at home, then how does that non-compartmentalization create a different expectation for your employer to do more than just supply your paycheck, but to bring you a sense of fulfillment or a sense of purpose? So a lot of what they were talking about at that table, I think, in a way addresses how the expectation might be accelerated by the fact that we're just spending more time alone.
Good, thanks to all three of you. Let's turn it over to Beth. Beth, how about it of our virtual attendees? Anything to add?
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, perfect.
All right, great. So we had 5 breakout rooms with very lively conversations across all the topics. I'm just going to read a couple of solution suggestions that people had. One is that we really need to rebuild trust and transparency in organizations, and there were suggestions to do that potentially through design thinking, human-centered design. There should be a baseline for expectations across the board. I would imagine that means leadership and all employees, and maybe do some mediation and different kinds of training so people can develop the skills, I guess, for difficult conversations. Also, different kind of mapping processes. Who does what, where, how is data being used, and for completing a task, and what kinds, and different kinds of technology platforms, and ensure transparency and accountability and fairness. And I think those kind of go across the board, addressing probably all the topics.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to ask a question. Thanks, Beth. I'm going to ask a question to the group here and the group online. So we keep coming back to this notion of trust. However, if we think about it somewhat coldly, agendas are different among participants in an organization. The agenda of the employer is different than the agenda of the employee. In the best cases, they overlap. But at the two poles, P-O-L-E-S, they're different. How do we reconcile that? Because as much as a CEO will get out and say, we're all in one team, and here's the vision, and here's the future, those quarterly results tank, there's a rift coming. So how do we deal with that? You only get 10 words to answer that question. No, Crystal, what do you got?
Oh, sorry. So I'll give you one way because it's on my mind. It's equity compensation. So if you can have an opportunity to either give employees equity and or give them the opportunity to buy in an employee stock purchase plan, then the business's goals are aligned to yours, because when the company does better, you also do better because you're an owner, right? You want people to think and act like an owner. And I think it's a great timing to say this because we're seeing so many rifts. So this opportunity to create psychological safety is very difficult when people are anxious about like their jobs.
Great. So one answer is to give people a financial stake in the company. Do you want to say something? Good. Thanks. I'm not giving up my microphone.
So we're actually addressing the second question about the difficult conversation, but I think the point that we raised about the two-way effort from the employer and employees is also make a good point here. So the effort is not just one way, but it's supposed to be reciprocal. So the employer need to being more sensitive, having more empathy to the employees. But on the other side, the employees also need to reciprocate the effort that employers has been given to us to become more like to be motivated and then more optimistic and other. But it's kind of like two-way efforts between the employer and employees.
Mm-hmm. All right, Michael? Yeah, all right.
I'll keep it to 10 words or less. I think that was 10 words right there. These were great views. I think that no matter what is said, make sure that the words and the actions of the leadership team are aligned. Because even the hardest message, if it's aligned, can be received. But the moment you say one thing and do something else, the focus will be on the misalignment, will be on your honesty or your integrity, not the underlying message. So I say whatever you do, whatever programs, however you handle compensation or equity, et cetera, make sure that you think through what you're going to say to your people so that your actions can follow with great precision.
Great, thank you. And I see we have a hand up online. So Chris? And Grace, I saw you nodding too. If you want to talk, we'll come to you next if you like. But Chris, let's start it off.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that the first two and probably the third answers kind of acknowledge that we're moving toward an era of more transactional orientation between employers and employees. And so I think whereas trust in a very human term has traditionally been a feeling, and kind of a mutual bond, I think we're moving to an era where and it was said in the second answer here, like, can you anticipate reciprocity? And that sort of, I think it almost erodes trust a little bit. The thing I wanted to bring in was we're also seeing the introduction of agents, AI kind of operating more autonomously. And so when two agents encounter each other, what's how they go about trusting one another? And I think it has to follow that human tendency to think about, well, if I do a favor for you, or if I extend my trust, does it extend back to me from you?
Oh, all right. Thank you, Chris. If we can go back to the multi-panel, I just want to check in if anyone has a hand up. Brett?
Greetings. Building on the points, there is, if you look at the first question and to the third question, which pushes us into the second question, if the employer-employee relationship is going to be different, there's a cultural change that needs to be embraced. And part of that embrace is accepting of responsibility by those who are asking for more responsibility. It's all well and good to say, hey, I want to be part of this and empower me and give me all these cool benefits. But the organization exists for a purpose. It was created either to make money, to do a thing, whatever. And if you want to be part of that, that's great. You have a responsibility to participate in that, that's great. And you have responsibilities to do your part. And the fact that you're not doing your part can create tension in the organization. So while everyone wants all the cool benefits of being equal because, of whatever rationale, they also have to understand there's a responsibility that comes with that on the other side of that. And if we don't, that's where we have the difficult conversations.
All right, thank you. I'll do one more check on the panels. Okay, so back to the room. Employee-employer expectations, difficult conversations. Anything to add on the difficult conversations? Oh, there's a hand up? Great. Thanks, Dee. I can't see a name there. Youngie?
Yeah, so one thing that I want to add about this question is I think it's critical to re so to change the mainstream understanding of what leaders' responsibilities are and what are the competencies necessary for our leaders, because over the last 30, 40 years, they've been increasingly narrowly focused. And the impact that we've seen is tenures in the C-suite have been decreasing. Stress levels have been increasing. And I would make the case that our leaders have become less effective. And one of the outcomes that we've seen is that the lifespan of corporations has been plummeting as well.
Very interesting. And do we think the lifespan of corporations, I wonder sometimes if we attribute too much to leadership. This may be provocative, but intentionally so. Because there's so many situations, Tamika said in the panel, there's so many things outside of our control. It's constantly changing. So I'm wondering if we invest too much authority or expectations on the parts of leadership and really set them up to fail and set ourselves up for disappointment.
One of the things that I'd like to comment about that is I think that leadership research has been overly focused on the leader. And the leaders cannot succeed without understanding the systems theory of organizations. So they need to understand how to lead, including everybody in the organization. Otherwise, it doesn't seem to work.
Great, thank you. Comment from here?
Yeah, I think this segues into the next question about data-driven leadership. And I think one of the problems is that a lot of leadership follows data, and that's not really true leadership. You're always working on something that's previously measured to lead you into the future. And if you look at a lot of companies that really do excel and accelerate, they're ones with innovative ideas that are otherwise unprecedented.
Interesting. Excuse me for a moment, Sam. So this, I think, might be a gift. I love this quote, and you're free to use it. But I had a partner who was the chief labor negotiator for New York City at the time of Ed Koch. And he had this line about data. If you torture the data, it will confess. Just love that line. I throw it into conversations at ShopRite too. Sam?
Yeah, so in terms of the question around leadership, and I like your provocative question, do we have too much on leadership? I think maybe the panel might have touched on this. Traditional leaders were leaders because they had all the information and they were in a position of making decisions. But with the advent of AI and all this information available to everyone, it's being democratized. So could we not, each of us, make those decisions, have the same level of access to the information? So maybe you're right, Dr. Safia.
Well, it's interesting. So in my career, when I was a kid consultant, they used to send me out to different parts of companies. And I remember working for one large money center bank, and they always referred to the different divisions as such and such as world. This is Joe's world. There's usually guys at the time. This is Joe's world. And it always sounded strange to me. Like, does that make the person God? And it just felt too much to me. Yeah, good point, Sam. Yeah, go ahead, Susan.
So I'd like to follow up on what we've been just saying here about the issue of, leaders at all levels, right? Which probably you all represent in different ways. And how does like leadership at the very top tap into that? Because one of the things that happens, as we know, with change efforts in organizations is most of them fail. And one of the reasons it's complicated, of course, is that people are not asked what they think and allowed to make some of those decisions at all levels. It comes from the top and it trickles down, and the expectation is, I say it, you'll follow. And that is not the way that real change can work in organizations. And so it can take some courage to step up at your level, right? But you all can be proactive in taking on that responsibility to the extent that you can. And then cumulatively, we can see the rippling effect through the organization that will then hopefully allow for greater involvement in the change at all levels. And I think that's really key.
Great, thank you. Grace, I see a hand.
I think this ties into what everyone pretty much was saying. And one of the things I like to think about is what about the leaders in the organization who don't have the title, right? So you're in an organization and you have people who are really good leaders and they don't have the title of leader, right? And but there's a certain power around them and they get things done. And I think it ties into the whole idea of a lot of us have access to information now. And if in most organizations we stop thinking of the hierarchy and we think a little bit more of the autonomy that each person has as a leader and tap into that and encourage that, then maybe that would help a little bit. But I was thinking along those lines.
Very good. Yep. More microphone here, please.
Hi, everybody. We talked about it too, about bottom-up narrative. How do you talk about difficult topics, not from top to bottom, but from bottom up? How do you see this on the level when the information starts growing and it disperses by itself organically? And also giving a voice to employees, exactly the leaders without the title. So I think it all closes the loop of addressing difficult conversations with the leaders who probably are not leaders with their title, but they do have the knowledge and they do have the capacity to do that.
Great, thank you. Has anyone dealt directly with the question of, and we've talked about it now, but with all the data that's available to us, what's changing? Anyone? Go ahead, yeah, please. No, I'm taking this home with me.
One of the points that was brought up at our table was because data is such a mirror, it gives you what you put into it, and that can cause a lot of confirmation bias as we're looking at data. One of the things that was brought up is that where do we bring a fundamental being into our knowledge, and looking at data for being an expander versus an originator. And so
what do you mean by that?
So when you already have trusted knowledge with yourself or with your team, let's using the workplace, how do you use like ChatGPT as like pushing that knowledge forward, and you able to kind of check it as it's giving you back to you, versus I don't know anything about this topic, let me go to the data to see what it tells me. So that was, I'm kind of pulling from what our table was talking about there.
Great, okay, so it's the spring, I'm a baseball fan, with apologies, I'm going to use a baseball metaphor. So it feels to me like we're in the 8th inning, not quite the 9th inning, but the 8th inning, we're almost done. What I'd like to ask everyone is just take a minute or two for reflection, and I'm going to ask you the question, given all the things we've talked about, do we have any hints of solutions about anything? So just start that kind of stem. I think a solution for this would be, and it doesn't have to be perfect, it could just be an idea. So I'm just going to ask to take a couple of minutes of quiet time to give you a sense to collect your thoughts. It doesn't have to be the facilitator, but what can we solve for? So 2 minutes of quiet. On this one, we can also start with the virtual rooms. Anyone has something they'd like to volunteer, please pop an electronic hand, and I'll know to call on you. Okay, let's hit it. We'll try to be crisp and wrap up in about 10 minutes or so. Brett?
To get all knowledge managey for a second, because that's what I do, I am a big proponent of mapping of processes. And in this particular case, I think mapping of processes is a useful way to address all three of these questions in an active way. First off is you determine a big thing you want to be able to do, and you identify a defined start and finish, which means you immediately have established a responsibility piece. And then the stakeholders, who's involved in this or who do we think's involved in this? And that starts the conversation flowing in terms of how things are being done. As these steps are being proposed and moved together, you're going to start seeing a couple things, which is one, where is data being used to either facilitate a step of process or to enable a decision? And then the other part of it is you're going to start seeing who else needs to be involved that currently isn't. So what knowledge is necessary to perform a step and what data or dashboards are necessary to inform people about that data. And then the last part of it is if there's a potential for conflict, your difficult conversation is proceeding from the premise of a known point. We see where there's a potential conflict, whether it is a conflict between two individuals who are vying for power, or if it's a conflict of roles, or if it's a cultural collision, or if it's any access to data, or any of the other things that creates conflict in the workplace, whether you're talking about a micro-sized workplace or a very large organization. So by walking it through and being able to depict that literally graphically in a way, you can help the employees understand their roles and their interactions, so you can identify the leaders, the followers, and other things. You can identify where data and analytics are very necessary, and then you can identify and possibly stave off or facilitate good conversations about that are difficult topics. Over.
Great, thank you. Can we get the microphone out to Niraja?
Thank you. Hi everyone, I'm Nirja. I want to solve for burnout and increase productivity. And I think we can do that, starting at the top with leadership. More transparent leadership. I find that someone said words and actions. I think that's absolutely true. I think there's a lot of ambiguity, a lot of chaos when there isn't transparency from the top. So I think if leaders can just be a lot more clearer and blunt about what they want, that'll solve a lot of problems. Two, I think creating consistent managers and consistent manager framework, because that's really your key to making sure that you have a culture that's a lot more consistent in the organization. So making sure that managers really are empowered to lead and have a clear understanding of what's coming from the top. And three, creating an environment of psychological safety so that people can speak up and not feel afraid that they're going to be fired or they're going to, something's going to happen with their job. Because I think a lot of times, back to, I think, Steve, you asked about the two different poles, right? I think it's how can we make sure that leaders are able to be transparent and create an environment of psychological safety so that people can speak up. And then we can have that transparent dialogue, because that's the only way to, I think, solve a problem, which sounds very simple, but...
Well, no other than a great leader, Ringo Starr, said, "I don't ask for much, I only want trust, and it don't come easy." Sam, did you want to say something?
I would say replicate tonight. And what I mean by that is just the power of crowdsourcing with such cross-disciplinary, just different diverse backgrounds towards a single focus and topic. I mean, how often do we see that in our organizations? We're usually clumped together with our same functions, et cetera. So it's very powerful tonight. So thank you for hosting. I think we should do more of that.
Thank you. Glad we gave you a free ticket. Yeah? Did you want to say something, or you stretch it up? You do? Okay. Alejandra, and then Dee.
I think for me, and it's only like in one phrase, is like ask questions. I think like for leaders and also like as an employers or as in students, I think you just need to raise your hand and ask questions to know how the other one is feeling when you have these so many different generations and everyone learns different, everyone expects different things on what they're hearing. And also like for in that as well, it's like what are the questions that you want to ask? So also to see what do you want to search like on, and so in that way you can tell a story with that. So I think like ask questions is for me like the where you can their start point.
Great. And as one of our student representatives, asking questions is kind of your middle name. Dee.
Okay, so I still remember in your lecture about the matrix management, and I'm thinking about.
Wait, can you just say that again about remembering something from my lecture?
Yes, it's about the matrix management. And when I heard about that, I think that it's really complex. And then I realized here, like, when we talk about leaders, we usually refer to the traditional structure with the hierarchical. So means that leaders is the one that holds the position or title as leaders. But actually, leaders is us. Leaders is everyone in this room. Because if I understand, if we put a lot of burden in the leaders, so who will be the leaders if it's not us? We understand what kind of the best capacity as leaders, and then we cannot just expect someone being a perfect leader, but maybe we can help the leaders itself, like managing the community, the team itself. So I think it makes sense now why a lot of company like forcing the matrix management system, because it gives us opportunity to be a leader in an informal setting, and then it's a really good environment to like reskilling your leadership ability and being agile. And it's also like answering the question previous, like what is different between the manager and the leader, because actually the leader is us. I think that's my reply.
Fantastic, thank you. Thank you. All right, one last comment I think from Chris, and then I'll do a quick wrap up.
Yeah, brief. I love the reframe on leadership from D. Sam mentioned, I'll call it convening, but bring folks together to have conversations. That's supportive of diversity of voice and opinion, et cetera. My ad would be that, and I try to tell all my classes this, that the future belongs to those with the most relevant mental models. What I mean by that is, in order to lead in this kind of new informal way, that we have to have mastered a number, maybe not mastered, but we have to be familiar with a lot of different disciplines so that we can very nimbly navigate uncertain information. I mean, we don't even know if we can trust the weather. We don't know if climate change is real, depending on who's saying it. And so I think leadership is this ability going forward. Leadership's this ability to kind of hold conflicting things in our minds, and through our intuition, the past, and also the ability to convene people, like Sam was saying, to point a way forward. And by the way, you're not going to know, it's not certain because it's completely unprecedented. So you're just saying, I think this is where we're headed. It's these kind of conversations that are going to bring certainty.
All right, well, everyone, thank you very much. I think, and I'll echo what everyone said, and perhaps Sam at the end, this cross current of conversations, getting a chance to meet people, looking at things from different disciplines, I think really does open us up. I have, this format was somewhat experimental, so I have a special request for people who are online. Lisa's going to put my email address, and I'd love to hear from the people online, is there a way we could do this better and differently? Because I think hybrid teaching and hybrid events is really the way of the world. And of course, I welcome anybody's feedback. You'll see my uni, and it'll go to Christoph and Beth and me. But especially people online, because you've hung with us, you've contributed, hopefully you've talked with each other and you've learned. I'd like to hear if you have any ideas of how we can do this even better next time. So people online, thank you very much. If you're, as we are in the evening, have a good evening and a good night. Beth, thanks very much for your leadership. And thanks to our technology people for making this happen. People in the room, we have space for at least another hour. There's food, there's time to talk, so please mingle and have a good time.